This is the American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Drea Dahl.
Drea Dahl, how's your week been?
Pretty good.
We have a fantastic, I was going to say great, but it's even better. It's a fantastic half hour of political power. We're going to be talking about Harvey and the devastation wrought, but we will also talk about hope. We'll talk about where to give, maybe where not to give in order to help victims. And we'll also be interviewing Colin O'Mara. He's with the Wildlife Federation. I like that. That's going to be a very interesting interview about national monuments. And we'll be covering everything in politics because that's what we do. If you want to find out more about American Roundtable, you want to go to facebook.com/USA Roundtable. That's facebook.com/USA Roundtable. Also, remember our friends at mixingsexy.com. It's a great place to meet people. This is the American Roundtable on Tough TV 38 and Tough TV. We'll see you in a moment. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. It is great to be here with you. Drea Dahl, I just love you. You are astute and you're funny as anything. So let's take a little bit of a look at politics that's maybe a little bit unorthodox. We're so happy that you're joining us if this is your first time watching American Roundtable on Tough TV. Let's take a look at Tropical Storm Harvey. Now, Tropical Storm Harvey, one of the worst disasters in American history it's turning out to be. It's almost like a Katrina effect, I would say. This flooding, this breaching of levees and dams, and an amazing amount of water has been put through. I just want to give you some ideas. The National Weather Service gauge measured almost 50 inches of rain, the most ever from a tropical storm or hurricane. What do you think of that?
I think it's horrible, but I wish people would start listening to the evacuation.
Well, that's right. I mean, the levee at Columbia Lake south of Houston breached. Brazoria County officials were not mincing words. In a tweet, they wrote, "Get out now," in all caps with 2 exclamation points. Meanwhile, the Brazos River measured nearly 52 feet, actually crested around 59 feet by the time everything was said and done. Easily a record. The Addicks Dam hit its overflow level. And, they worry about, of course, other dams as well. They also worry about lingering damage. Now, you had an interesting aside about the Lakewood Church, Drea Dahl. What exactly were you talking about on that?
What's the Lakewood Church?
Osteen.
Oh, he wouldn't let people in his church without paying? Is that what he did?
Well, my understanding is that I guess there was a delay before he let people in. There was some kind of a delay. Now, he said there was flooding, and there very well could have been. But he took a lot of flack regardless. There's a lot of that, I don't know, they call it like the outrage posse or the outrage crew or something now, where everybody gets into this rage together. It's almost like it's like a bonding experience. And they rage against stuff, and they put it online, and they yell and scream, and then people have to apologize. And we'll be talking about that in a little bit too. But just basically, things are still a mess, obviously, in Houston, and we will be giving you some information on how to help. The Shriners, I'm a Shriner, they're always doing something in the area. I'm sure that they're going to be doing something in Houston as well. So you might want to go to Shriners, put in Shriners in a Google search, and it'll pull you to the site. But, of course, our prayers and thoughts go to everyone in Houston, and including some friends of mine that live there. So our thoughts are with you. More in a moment on American Roundtable. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. I am so happy to have our guest. It is Colin O'Mara. He's the President and CEO of the National Wildlife Federation, NWF.org, and he's going to be talking to us today about some interesting things having to do with national sites, national monument sites, and some things that are happening with the new administration. So, Colin, I'd like to welcome you to the American Roundtable. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, it's great to have you on. First, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this organization that you're leading.
Sure. So I first became involved with the National Wildlife Federation when I was actually about 4 years old. I was a Ranger Rick kid, and I don't know if you've had the chance to interact with Ranger Rick magazine, but my mom was a school teacher, and I found myself always outdoors doing the great activities with the Ranger Rick. And I've had a career that's worked in natural resources and cities, and I was the Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of Delaware for 5.5 years, and I got a call from a headhunter asking if I'd be interested in serving as the head of the National Wildlife Federation. And it's always been one of my favorite organizations in the country. I think the work they do is incredibly important. And I was just honored to lead our 6 million members and our great 50 state affiliates.
Well, this is fantastic. Tell us about the organization and how it started and what its purposes is.
Sure. So the National Wildlife Federation was founded 81 years ago in 1936, and Franklin Roosevelt actually convened sportsmen and birders and gardeners and foresters and farmers from across the country to talk about the plummeting wildlife populations. And this is building on the legacy of his distant cousin Theodore Roosevelt, who had begun to kind of talk about conservation in a bigger way. But the concern in the 1930s, at the height of the Depression, was that the waterfowl, the duck populations were at record lows. The bison were already basically shot off the plains. The passenger pigeons were shot out of the sky. And you had these massive natural resource impacts where you saw deforestation in the west. You had wetlands being lost in the east. You had the Dust Bowl kind of destroying soil quality in the kind of lower Midwest, upper South.
Yeah, things weren't very good.
No, it's pretty dark days, and President Roosevelt brought folks together to basically say, how do we deal with the wildlife and the natural resource issues? And out of that meeting, the National Wildlife Federation was born. And so a year later, they passed Pittman-Robertson, which is the way that we fund wildlife conservation mostly in this country, which is a small excise tax on hunting munitions and shooting equipment. And so we've been involved in trying to bring back wildlife populations from bison and deer and wild turkeys to things like bald eagles, and today things like sea turtles and monarch butterflies and everything in between.
Well, so you guys really care about, obviously, the horticulture, the animals, the wildlife, and so you partner with sportsmen and other people too, I'm guessing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're entirely bipartisan, kind of, and I mean our goal is to make sure wildlife can thrive in our rapidly changing world. And so I hunt and I fish. I got folks that I bird, I garden. I kind of do all these activities, and we want to be a place that folks that might not agree on anything else. They might not agree on anything in politics or any other issue, but they care about wildlife, that they can come together and still show that this country can get big things done, and not everything has to be a partisan fight.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It seems like we've become very partisan in this country, but I know people that are liberals that hunt. I know people that are conservatives that hunt. I know people everywhere in between. I know people that like the outdoors on both sides as well. I think we've got to find more commonality in America personally. And you obviously are very passionate about this. You said you have passion going back to when you were a kid. So this is probably, I'm guessing, a dream type job for you.
Absolutely. I mean, my grandfather used to say, if you can find if you find the opportunity to work on something that you really care about, you're really blessed. And I think I've been blessed in my career is my passion. And trying to introduce tens of millions of kids to have the same kind of experiences, and really have an impact on at a time when the average kid's spending 50 hours a week in front of a screen, and more folks are moving into cities. Like, how do we kind of create these lifelong conservation stewards by exposing them to all the wonders of wildlife?
Yeah, we have to, because they're just being exposed to the wonders of the Android and the iPhone, it seems. So we'll have to talk more about that. We're going to actually also get to one of the big things that you're bringing people's attention to after this. This is the American Roundtable on Tough TV 38 and the Tough TV network. This is the American Roundtable with Drea Dahl and myself, Al Spry. We're so happy to have Colin O'Mara here on Tough TV and Tough TV 38 in Orlando, Florida. Now, where are you based, Colin?
So right now I'm actually in Washington, D.C., but I actually live in Delaware. I actually love being kind of outside the Beltway, but unfortunately lately I feel like I'm sleeping on planes more nights than not. I get to about 48, 47 states a year.
Oh wow! So you're hitting your different organizations and stuff, and you're obviously you're the face of the organization, I guess. You're being the head guy, right?
Yeah, and so I feel like my worst day anywhere in the field is better than my best days in Washington right now. So
yeah, Washington. I can
seeing great
imagine.
conservation on the ground.
Yeah, I can imagine Washington being a pretty tough place right now. It's. I mean, it's always been a pretty wacky city, but it seems like they've taken it to another extreme. Especially,
yeah, and the sad thing is
especially
that
recently.
on a lot of these issues, there actually is bipartisan, agreement. It's just a matter of finding the bandwidth when they're fighting over everything else.
Well, let's take a look at this, and then Drea Dahl has a question for you. But right now, you're talking about this National Monuments Review that was pulled out recently of 27 national monuments established under the Antiquities Act. Tell us exactly what that is. What are these monuments, and what's happening now?
Sure. So in 1906, Congress passes the Antiquities Act at the urging of Theodore Roosevelt, and he wanted the ability to protect kind of special places that either had cultural or natural resource or wildlife kind of values. And so over the next 110 years, 111 years, presidents from both parties have used it. It's protected places like the Tetons. Was originally a national monument. A lot of the parks today started off as monuments, and then they became parks later. And right now there's a review being initiated by the Trump administration to take a look at the last 27 largest of the monument designations, and it's really unprecedented. Not since 1963, when Kennedy was still president, has a monument been changed. And I think what we're trying to do is make sure that kind of Americans across the country are speaking up, saying that we love these places, we want to see them conserved. We want to see them managed better. We want to see more hunting and fishing. We want to see more access. We don't want these places completely walled off. But that the right answer isn't to kind of take a step backwards, just to make them better, as opposed to reducing their size or eliminating them completely.
Well, what would be the benefits? Who does it serve by changing these borders of these monuments?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times there are like local economic interests. So some of them prevent oil and gas drilling in some places in Utah. There's some places where folks want to see additional timber harvest in places like Oregon or in Maine. There's some concerns about water access for local communities in the Southwest, in like Nevada, for example. And our position is that that a lot of these uses can be compatible. You can actually find common ground for multiple use. But the answer isn't to kind of reduce the boundaries. The answer is to have conversations with local folks and find those kind of optimal solutions that are trying to serve different needs.
Drea?
So when you guys do this, what do you guys do? They pay the people when they take the land for national conservative?
Yeah, so the land's federal, and so most of these are lands that are controlled by like the Bureau of Land Management or the U.S. Forest Service. I think that there's always a fear about some of these lands being sold to like industrial estates. That's not really what this review is about. This review is about whether or not some of these areas should have this higher level of protection, of conservation, or whether they should go back to kind of just regular federal lands, which allow a lot more kind of extractive activities. Which obviously folks do pay royalties for and things like that. But this is more about management and the level of conservation as opposed to the ownership.
I gotcha. This is interesting because what's your feel for what the president's doing? He seems to want to be changing a lot of different things and kind of stirring things up. What do you see as his intentions here with these monuments, though? What do you think's going on there? Is it just another way to change things, or?
I think during the campaign, I think he heard concerns about it in a couple of places. A lot of these had amazing public support, like in places like New Mexico and in places like Colorado and in Utah. But there's some folks that don't like the federal government's involvement in different things. I think you heard those. I think there's also been a bit of a knee-jerk reaction that if the previous administration did it, if President Obama did it, it must be bad, and therefore. There's this kind of ideological ping pong that's being played where, if President Bush did something, then maybe it got undone by President Obama, then it got, then President Trump goes back the other direction. So we're in a little bit of this ideological war.
We'll talk more about that in a moment. This is Colin O'Mara on the line with us here on American Roundtable, President and CEO of the National Wildlife Federation. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. Colin, so happy to have you here. Colin with the National Wildlife Federation. He's the president and CEO. For more information, go to nwf.org. That's N as in Nancy, WF.org. So, Colin, obviously this Bundy incident that you were inferring earlier might have something to do with this. It seems that Trump plays a lot to his base in very overt ways. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I think that the standoff first both in Nevada originally and then later at the Malheur Refuge up in Oregon. There's this very small group of I would call them zealots. I mean, maybe even worse than that. That we're basically trying to take over these sites that are already public, that are already accessible. Out of kind of disdain for the federal government, and I do think that there's this kind of anti-federal kind of bias in some places. What we found in Oregon, though, is that the folks actually really supported the local refuge, and they were furious that they destroyed buildings and roads and cultural artifacts.
Well, is there money here? Didn't it
it
have to do with grazing or cattle grazing or something? Wasn't that something to do with it?
It's always to do with money.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in the Nevada case, it was about grazing rights, and some folks hadn't paid their leases, and then therefore the leases were taken away, and it became, it basically came back to folks not kind of fulfilling their responsibilities. And then in Oregon, there was issues around both livestock and forestry that it becomes like the conflict. And I think for me, the solution isn't to take the land away or to give it to the states. It's actually have a constructive conversation about how we use it better and more sustainably and for multiple benefit, multiple values.
Oh, sure, and that's a pretty even-handed way of looking at it. Before we go, what are some of your activities? You're doing a lot of lobbying, it sounds like.
Yeah, so we're do a lot in the Hill and in the 50 state capitals across the country. We're in 11,000 schools across the country with our wildlife education programming, and our Ranger Rick publications reach about 2.5 million kids. And then we're doing a lot with like the big waterways across the country, really just trying to make sure that wildlife has a voice in every corner of the country, because right now there's about 8,000 species that are in trouble and could be potentially at risk of extinction in the coming 30, 40, 50 years. And we're really trying to make sure that we're doing as much collaboratively on the ground with folks across the country to try to save these species, so you don't need more heavy-handed regulatory solutions. I think we can do a lot of this stuff proactively. By getting folks to come together and collaborate, as opposed to the conflict that sometimes embodies this kind of work.
That's right. We stop, we collaborate, and listen. Thank you so much, Colin O'Mara, President and CEO of NWF. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks to Steve Becker as well. This is the American Roundtable. Some final thoughts after this. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. Drea Dahl, what'd you think of our friend Colin O'Mara?
Pretty cool. I like what he's doing, saving the critters.
I like critters. I like wide open spaces. I think people need to find solutions. I understand that you have folks on one side who are worried about government encroachment. However, on the other side, you got critters. So I guess you got to try to find common ground is probably what we're looking at here.
The critters win.
I think the critters win. I agree with you on that. Texas obviously is going through a great ordeal right now. There's a company called Best Buy. They've been around a long time. They sell appliances and TVs and stereos and discs and games.
Geeks.
And then, they're a pretty innocuous company. Well, they decided that as Hurricane Harvey bore down on Lone Star State, one of these Best Buys in Texas, decided that potable water was a very precious commodity all of a sudden. Instead of giving it away like many organizations and businesses do, because this is a necessity for human life, they decided to charge $43 for a 24-pack of bottled water, $42.96 to be exact. And a 12-pack of Smart Water was selling for $29.98, roughly $30, with a warning that there was a, quote, limited supply. After a photo of the steep prices showed up at the store in Cypress, Texas, and it went viral, outraged tweeters pummeled the big box retailer. Rep issued a mea culpa, calling the practice a big mistake made by an employee. You better believe that there was some management involvement in there too. The cost based on the price per individual bottle, which is how Best Buy usually sells its water. However, this seems like a fairly lame excuse. Your thoughts, Drea?
Best Buy should be giving away water. in these kind of situations, and whoever made this price or participated or worked that day should be fired.
Well, Best Buy isn't alone. More than 600 complaints of outrageous prices have poured into the Texas State Attorney General's office, including stores charging $100 for a case of drinking water, hotels tripling rates, and gas going for $10 a gallon. Yes, $10 a gallon. There's warning, of course, from AG Ken Paxton. Anyone caught inflating prices faces a $20,000 fine, up to $250,000 if the victim is 65 or older. Paxton says goods won't run out of state as large as Texas, even as Harvey continues to do its duty all over the place.
There should be bigger sanctions on companies like Best Buy for doing this.
I really think there should be. $25,000 is nothing. It's a slap on the wrist. They'll sell more, make more money selling the water. Well, that's it. That does it for American Roundtable. Thank you so much, Drea Dahl.
Thanks for watching.
I am so happy that you joined us. I'm Al Spry. This is your 30-minute hour of power. We call it the no spin zone because that's how we see it. American Roundtable's on Tough TV and Tough TV 38. Find us at facebook.com/USA Roundtable. Remember to keep it real.
Keep it tough.